Hello everyone and thank you for joining. In this video we're going to be developing a new microcontroller together, and it's going to be used in all of my vessels if it's successful, and it's supposed to be a self-driving autopilot, meaning you turn on a button and now the vessel will actually be like on a smart autopilot mode, and it'll be avoiding obstacles and turning automatically and that type of stuff. When it comes across, say, a bridge, column, it's going to avoid it, or another or island or a ship or something. So what inspired me was the new update with the controllable or aimable lasers and cameras and all that. So we've taken the RSV Altras, that's going to be our platform for this, and let's dig in. So on the screen here is our trusty Bluebeam PDF editor. Like I said, as an engineer I use this pretty much every day. And what I've done is I've created a quick hand sketch to explain sort of exactly what I have in mind for this. And I developed this pretty quickly, but just to give me an idea. So here we have our boat, and it's traveling towards, say, an island. Now this laser beam on the side will obviously hit the island first, and it'll tell the boat to turn in this direction. And that's sort of the general gist. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, because in addition to hitting this island, we have to make sure that once we've cleared the island, so once we've made our way to here and we're, say, like past the closest point of contact, it'll turn itself back on the original path, say back to wherever it was originally going in that setting. Now I predict some setbacks, like for example, if someone actually sets this island to be the destination, the boat is gonna have an issue because it's gonna come as close as it can, and then it may move around the island, and then it's gonna start to move away. So I'll see if I can make a disabler, like if the distance starts to increase, it will stop the vessel. Now that may work negatively, because in this case, say we turn like this to go around, but our destination's somewhere here, and now you might end up losing some distance, like if you end up turning too much, or in the case of coming across an island like this, but obviously a little bigger, you may end up having to backtrack. Like, you say you come up to here and then you decide now it determines it has to go around, so it'd have to do something like this, in which case in this movement it'll actually be moving away from the position, so it may automatically stop it. But regardless, what I'm thinking of doing here is at first I thought we'll put the lasers in the front, but then with some thinking I thought the back is the way to go, because if they're at the back we don't come into a issue with hitting our island, like we don't clear it and then all of a sudden turn sharply into it and clip the island with our back end. So that's sort of what I'm thinking. Now what we'll have an on switch, obviously, so you turn this mode on. Now once contact is made with the island, or with a boat or a column of a bridge or whatever, it turns the lock on. So we're going to see if that works. Now it's going to know the distance, and it's going to turn to avoid it until it's clear. And like I said, it's going to use, we could use this distance from here to here to determine, using speed, to say, okay, now we've cleared the island. But I think that's also a bit more complex. Now on this side, what I've thought about is we got our 3 sensors, we got our velocity in, we got rudder in, rudder out, throttle in, throttle out, and I've thought of a few others which we're going to add as we go through the video. And then obviously, if the final destination is past, stop the ship. So I already talked about that. So that's pretty much the gist of what I had in mind. This is just a quick hand sketch, but I think that it'll get us kind of going. So let's see. Now back in Stormworks, like I said, first we'll start off by putting a laser right here. We're going to leave this microcontroller. This is actually where our distance sensor is. That tells us to stop if we're about to collide into something. But I don't want to change the boat too much. Now it's going to be more like a very obvious things that I'm adding here. So we got that one in the front, and what I'm wanting to do is have a symmetrical one as far back as possible. So even here, but obviously if we do decide to make a nicer design, there's probably better. Now with that, we know, and we talked about the composite pivot point that we're gonna have to add, and I have just the thing. So I've created, if you remember, the pivot with sweep. So this thing will actually sweep the laser automatically in a certain way that we decide we want. So if we go to this, let's start first with our X sweep. So that means we're facing this direction and we want it to sweep like this. Just to, I mean, obviously in the distance, it's going to be not, so it's not in a straight line, but we don't want it to be fixed. We want it to actually be moving, and we want it to be moving pretty fast. So back in our microcontroller here, I'll reduce the blinker duration to like 1 second, and we'll increase the increment to say let's go 0.5. We'll try that. Now obviously we also don't want the thing to go doing a full sweep. Like, we don't need it to go to the into the ship. It's going to obviously detect a collision if it goes into the ship. So we're going to set our minimum to 0 and our reset to 0 and our maximum to 1, and let's just give that a shot. So we're going to move that out, and last thing we need to do is just a constant on signal and connect that to our 2 or 3 lasers. We'll plug it into the front one as well. And we need electric, so we'll piggyback off our critical systems. Sure, technically this is an electronic system, so if I do decide to keep this in the creation, I might make it an electronic system, but let's see what happens. So it's moving in the wrong direction, and there was some bit of confusion, to be honest, with the way I made this microcontroller. I'd probably make it a little bit different nowadays, because when we put this to 0.6, but then let's just try negative 0.5 and see what happens. I think it's now going to go in the opposite direction. There we go. So as you could see now, it's moving like that. Now that's too far out, because I don't need it to, like, it's, imagine how far straight ahead it's going to be pointing. We don't quite need it to be arcing that far out. So let's do some fine tuning and I'll get back to you. So I went ahead and fine combed through this and did a couple tests. I found out that an increment of 0.3 with a reset of 1 and a max of 0.6 will be the best. Blinker is 0.6, and actually I do want the Y direction to be on as well, but moving at a slower pace. So you're going to see kind of what happens. Now we may have to adjust this, but in essence, check that out. It's moving constantly, like still going up a little, up, 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 and it's going to start moving down, down, down. So there it goes down. And the reason for that is that we check above and below the vessel. Now I think this is still, and the front, I did it just to sweep left and right. Now I think it's all too much, so we can do a quick reduction of all that. If we take a look at this, we have 0.1, and then if we go into our creation, we definitely do not need it to sweep left and right as much in this case. So we can have it going to the left and right. Like, what if we do 0.2 and negative 0.2 with an increment of 3 or whatever, increment of 0.1, reset value is 0, just to see what happens there. And then even on our side ones, I really don't need it to go to 0.6. I think 0.3 or something less would be more than enough. And let's just make this like 0.1. Let's see how slow it's going to be. Slow or fast, we're going to find out in a second. But this is why you just got to keep spawning and checking it out. Yeah, that's probably enough. Now what is the front doing? Yeah, the front's actually working. Now we don't need it to aim that high. Like, check it out. When they're this low, that's like they go up into the sky. Like, no obstacle is going to bother us if it's up there. But that's, I think, a good amount of motion to the left and right. So now it's just a matter of fine-tuning this. I'll be right back. So here in the y-axis, we actually have a value of 0.1, which we're going to decrease now to like 0.2. Let's give that a shot. And our time of 5 seconds is fine. Like, it slowly, goes. And to be honest, we probably don't even need much of a positive. Really, anything that's above the surface doesn't really concern us, because it's going to anyways be so far, like, it won't, unless it's like something that the bridge can hit. But in that case, I mean, I guess if it's something the bridge can hit, maybe it's worth considering. We'll put 0.2 and we'll see what happens. And same for the front one, because now we have just a full-on 0.1, so we'll put negative, or we have a full 1, so we'll just put 0.2. Spawn this and see what happens. So how high is that going is the question. Relatively high. Oh, it's not even going underwater. So that's interesting. We're definitely more concerned with more underwater obstacles. Also, we're listing. Okay, good to know. And I may have put some weight on the side of the vessel. Let's take a look at that. After some testing, this is what we have. So I can come down here and show you. So the laser is moving like kind of slowly up and down. You could tell like it's more or less aimed down. I may make it go a little higher, to be honest. But my key is that I don't want there to be large intersections. And you could see up there, right there, we kind of intersect, and it doesn't make any sense if the left scanner is picking up things the right, like, it doesn't make sense if we do like a vice versa type thing where the left sensor picks up something on the right. I don't need that, and that's going to just be very confusing. So we can even reduce well, technically no, it's aimed straight, so it's never going to pick up something. But what may happen is you may have this one in front picking up stuff that it really has no business picking up. And that's how I'm going to do this. And then the ones on the side, what I wanted to do is make sure they make their way up out of the water, not just be underwater fully. And that's what we do in the Y. So right now we have it as a max of 0.3. Reset value this. And maybe moving too slowly, that in that time period it doesn't have a chance to fully reset itself back to that number. So let's take a look at this. Now this is just trial and error. Like, stuff like this, you really just have to go out and fully do the test. Okay, there we go. So now it's aiming up and it's making its way down and kind of slowly makes its, oh no, it just does it up and down. It doesn't slowly move down. So I may look into why it's moving that quickly in the Y direction instead of over time. But that seems to be a pretty fair sweep. Now something way over there would not bother me. Like, if that's where the things pick up something super far, that's fine. But that's too high right now. So we gotta keep going with fine tuning. So what I have now is not bad for a start. So it kind of scans left and right and then it makes its way up and down. I may do some more tuning with that, and that may come into play afterwards, because I'm not quite sure how it's going to react when it loses contact with an island. Like, say when it's on the far left it's seeing an island, but on the far right it's not. The ship will want to kind of turn, and if it starts to turn too much, it may go into a constant kind of like turning, not turning, turning, not turning, turning, not turning, that may be jittery. So we'll see how that actually works. But that could also be fixed with a microcontroller. So anyway, for now we'll stick with this. The next step is to make the microcontroller that'll operate all this. So I went ahead and added what I thought will work. So we have an on switch, we have our left rear sensor, middle front, right rear, and then what I'm going to do is, just so it's an all-inclusive controller, I'm not going to have that one little aiming sensor or aiming microcontroller. It's going to be built into here. So the front sensor movement will be directly in here, and the side sensors will be another one. We have a rudder in, a rudder out, throttle in, throttle out, speed sensor, and an indicator pretty much telling us whether it's avoiding an obstacle, whether it's actively avoiding an obstacle. Now I didn't put anything anywhere, so let's see how we can arrange this. Now my first step with any microcontrollers to sort things out, sort of just visually first, with where the sensors, or where the microcontrollers go, and then we organize it based on that. So these are all inputs, and then these two are the outputs. So obviously rudder out and rudder in. Now I'm just going to join them for now. Throttle in, throttle out. These ones, the composites, will just be off to the side because they're doing their own thing. Obstacle avoidance indicator should not be an input, that's an output. So we now find out. So we can put it over here. If the system's active, now speed sensor as well, we'll figure out what to do with it. On switch is the key to everything, and we have our sensors themselves. So we got our middle one telling us things, and our left and right sensor telling us things. So based off of what we have, the short gist of it would be like, if the sensor detects something, so if it's less than a certain number, then obviously we're going to want, that means we're approaching said target or said object, and we now want to avoid it. So that's going to be kind of our starting point to all this. And then when we turn the button on, like realistically, it's just going to be something like a micro or a controller like this for the on switch. So if it's rudder in, it's just going straight through. So if this button is off, if the switch isn't on, then we're just controlling our rudder normally. If it is on, then we're going to need something like this. So that's going to be there, throttle in, throttle out. We'll worry about that in a bit. And we will have to add another item to this, is whether or not to stop the ship if we start to veer away from our target. But that's going to be something after, because then I have to open up the microcontroller for the autopilot. But let's just stick with this for now. I'm going to take a bit of time to think about this, and I'll get back. I've just developed a very, very, very primitive version of what I'm thinking. And with the exception of this one last thing, there's lots of flaws and bugs, but for now, let's just follow logic. So we have, if the rear left sensor detects a distance less than a number we put here. So if we see that it's all of a sudden like 50 meters or 49 meters, so it's less than this number we put, it's going to trigger this to become on. If this becomes on, it's going to turn on this on, meaning it's going to turn on this, it's going to turn the rudder. And then same thing here, except opposite. So in this case, if it detects something, it's going to turn on the opposite rudder effect, so negative of that rudder effect, and add. Now in theory, one bug is definitely if there's contacts on both sides, this thing's not going to know what to do. It's going to freak out. So we have to make some type of lock in place afterwards, because this addition could mean that both things are going to be potentially on and canceling each other out. But I want to just get a basic feeling of how this works, even if I have to turn off one of these sensors and see if the boat will actually turn to avoid an obstacle. And then obviously we have a rudder in and rudder out. Now this button is on currently and doing this, But a better system would be if we put if the button's on, and if it's detected one of these. Because in theory, the autopilot, or you could even turn this on when you're driving, and just say you're driving and you're operating the boat, and all of a sudden it starts to turn, it locks you out and it starts to turn. And then obviously once it's cleared the obstacle, you're back to controlling it. So it's on if one of these are on, so if it's less than this or this, and if this is on. So let's just give this very, very basic system a go. Now obviously we need to plug these into our rudder, and here what I have is a clamped number that gets fed from something back there. See, it was the manual yaw and to rudders. So that one right there is what's sort of controlling the actual rudders directly. Now, because of that, we want to put something right after our autopilot. So in this case, we have that coming into here. That's our rudder in, and clearly after that, our rudder out, if I can find it. Yeah, rudder out should be going to this. So no longer from there. And then likewise, this one said there was two things. One was that one and one was manual yaw. I'd want that one as well to be being fed from what I have here. So we're gonna pretty much cancel that one out and just be fed from there. Okay, next thing we have our wavelength, or whoops, distance. So this is left rear, and then over there is our right rear. Technically the front one's not doing anything right now, so we don't even have to worry about it right now. Throttle in, throttle out is not set even, so all of these things are not set. What I will do, actually, I'm going to jump into this, and I want, so our little indicator up here, if one or the other of these are on, and this, so let's just go here. So if we're no longer in control, I want this indicator to be on, just so we can get a feeling for how often it's turning on and off, pretty much. Okay, so that said, let's jump up to here. I'm gonna just steal one of these indicators. Now this does not have to be pretty. I don't care, I just need to make it functional so I could see what I'm doing. So we'll just throw that up there, we'll give it some power and connect it to the controller as the indicator. Okay, let's give it a shot. Just kidding, we can't give it a shot yet, we don't have a button to turn it on. So once we have our toggle button, and we're just going to put it up here, this one, and we'll link it to the same electricity, and we'll plug this in to the on-off switch and to laser active, because now I don't want it to be on all the time. One thing that I kind of thought about also was technically every time this laser points up so high, it's going to lose contact with what we're trying to get, and it's going to lose contact and it's going to start to turn back into it, even if it's not on it technically. So it's not in my best interest to have it go super high. Maybe the best thing is to be just level and not move at all. But I do think some type of movement is healthy. The reason why is because if we can get some movement, it'll just give us that much more of a sweep of the area. And actually, I'm just going to turn this on for a quick test, see what that looks like. See, now it's not really moving up or down at all. or very minimally. I mean, in the distance it is. That's probably fine. Anyway, let's give it a shot and see what happens. And this is my first test as well. Maybe it's going to be a huge failure, in which case we're going to have to go back to the drawing boards. But let's take a look. Oh, and that front laser's on, which is not perfect. And what I'm probably going to do is make the lasers infrared. There's no need for them to actually be physically on all the time. Okay, so now we still have steering, which is nice. Now I don't have anything set to my laser to tell us how far or close we are to that specific target. So like that rock may be, you know, we may already be too close for it to work, but I'm just gonna kind of wrap around myself here, and I'm gonna try to point my laser directly at it when I turn this button on. So let's do a quick turn here. And we're gonna aim our laser, meaning the right side should never, the laser on the right side should never touch it. So if we do this, okay, that goes way high. There, so in theory now, turn it on, let's see what happens. Oh, and we're getting the thing where it's touching both sides, and we're still even in control, so clearly it didn't kick me out yet. Alright. That did not work, so interesting. Back to the drawing board. I still had full control. Oh, in that case we must have been still too far. Let's get a dial up here. I want to see exactly what they see. So we're going to have a dial here and a dial here, and we're just going to set this to be for the distance there, and we're going to set the distance here on the other side, and let's take a look what happens now. 50 meters, that was what I had set, but 50 might be too small distance to turn. Let's go full 200 meters ahead. Okay, and again I'm leaving the viewable lasers in place just so we can get a full idea what's going on. Let's test them out. Okay, alright, and obviously they're off now, so they're not even detecting any distance, but let's just get a feel. So if I turn this on, that's 90, so 200, man, it may be even worthwhile to set it to like, you know, 400 meters or something like that to even clear any obstacle, because what if you're coming in pretty fast? Well, let's take a look. Let's try this one again. So we're coming in, and go. It's gonna kick on. There we go. So that was jerky, but it worked. I would love a bigger island, but this is actually a good test. So it actually did, like, it was jerky, but it pushed us away from that. Let's try again. Fair enough. Now let's pair that with the autopilot. So over here, if we turn on our autopilot system, we can tell it to go right through this island. Like, what if I put a destination here and hit start? Turn this on. Oh, so now anytime it's touching it, it's forcing it away. Very jerky. And once we clear that little dip, it's going to start turning and we're going to end up hitting it. Oh, maybe, yeah, so did not quite work. It kind of works, but we have to find a way to make it also trigger something that it's not like instantly on or off. So that's, I think, the next step. But as a very basic principle, it does work. Now we just have to develop it. The first thing that I want to do is increase this. So there's 20 will never work. I think at the minimum, it's got to be like let's say 100. And we could even go as far as like 400 technically, because sometimes it's better to just avoid things that much sooner. This doesn't have to go up by 10, it could go by 25. So I think that would work a little better now. The rudder turning the full on like either 0 or either 1 or nothing, it's very jerky. So this I'd even consider reducing. So we could put 0.5. But the key now is that we lock in this sensor. So if the sensor reads something, we lock it in with a latch, ideally, and then we reset it if the condition is met. So let's try that out. We'll pull these ones back. Now that turns on there, and this is just our on switch. So the ORs will really be plugged into whatever we put here, but realistically it's just these guys. So let's see. Now one of the ways would be to latch it in by time, so it's latched on, and then when it resets, it's due to a certain amount of time passing. So that's clearly one option. Trying to think what else could possibly work here. I guess what it could be is a calculation of the distance, because remember, we have our speed sensor somewhere. So we could use the speed sensor and the distance to determine the time it's going to take for us to reach that location. So if we're, moving at 10 meters a second and the thing's 100 meters away, X seconds will be the difference. And that's what we're going to have to play with to clear that obstacle potentially. But it's kind of too long to be turning that whole time. Like, you don't want to be turning for a full duration. So I'm going to try with a little timer, and see what happens. So I've added a turn timer, I put a property slider. We've set 4 seconds, so let's see how that works. Obviously it's turned on by our SR latch, and there's no reset, it just resets automatically every single time. So let's see how this now works. I didn't use the speed sensor, so that's not even in play yet. And the throttle as well. I mean, the throttle is going to come from the fact that maybe when we sense an obstacle, the boat actually slows down. Or when we get something on that front one, maybe it comes to stop, and that just acts like a deterrent, like a full-on obstacle avoidance system. Well, let's turn that on. So now, technically, once we hit the 200, this should kick on. Oh, there we go. So it actually turned on for the full 4 seconds, and we're back on track, granted the other way. So that was sort of interesting. A little less jerky, obviously, as well. Now, I want to do the same test where I had my, where I ride the autopilot. Because in theory now, my autopilot's going to be fighting this thing. So let's put a point here, let's zoom out and put a point up there, and let's just see what happens. So now we're pretty much riding right through this island, though something like this is a very intricate test, because normally what I'd imagine is you summon your vessel with your helicopter, like that function I have on the autopilot, and say you're above the island and the boat's below, you'll circumvent the island in theory. But now what we're doing is putting it to purposely drive into the island. So let's see how that works. Oh, okay, we've pushed ourselves away, and now that's off, so now we're turning back towards the island. Let's see what happens. It's gonna touch the first bit. Oh, it's gonna clear it. Why are we going in that direction? That was weird, the indicator wasn't even on. Okay, now it's turned on. But because both of our things have set, now it's like freaking out. But in theory, oh, come on. Turn us. Turn us. Nope. Oh. And there we go. So a low obstacle actually did mess us up this time. I thought it was gonna work, but close enough. I'm almost tempted to put an OR function on each one of these as well. That if you have, so the reset of this one comes from the timer. So let's do both. It comes from the timer, or it comes from the latching of the opposite one. This may be to our detriment, but what I'm thinking is if both of them detect something, hopefully it wouldn't be at the same time. Maybe one detects it a little sooner than the other one. That would be the side that we're hopefully closer to hitting. So that's kind of my thought process. Let's try that. This is a lot of trial and error. Unlike creating the Alta rig or anything, or even a boat or vessel or whatever, this is just straight up trial and error. Like, you just have to keep trying it, because truthfully the only way to perfect a microcontroller is through tests and tests and tests. Alrighty, let's give this thing a go again. We'll do the exact same test, because that is the most intricate after all. Turn this on. Alright, let's see what happens, and then what I'm going to do is zoom out of this. Let's tell it to go like that and that. Alright, we hit it. We're turning away. I mean, it's turning away a lot, but I'm fine with that. Let's see what happens now. So in theory, we're going to hit it on the left side and start turning away. Alright, it keeps bouncing us away from it. And then let's see. Oh, it's going to have like a sharp turn into the island, so we're actually moving farther away, so this isn't bad. This is going to be a really sharp turn right into that cliff. I don't even know if the boat can turn on a dime like this. It's going to be violent. Assuming it wants to do it at all. Yep, there we go. Alright. Now we're on track with the island, and we're getting 200, 250. Yeah. Oh. So there we go. Actually, what happened, it registered the opposite side, and now it's in big trouble. That was interesting. So, in this case, we're actually getting much further away from our target. Now, if we leave it forever, maybe it's gonna make its way around the other side of the island. Because now it's being blocked, and as long as it doesn't... Oh. It's because there was a little inlet that triggered the right side laser first. Like, that one rock triggered that. But see, we're still kind of moving towards that target. What's gonna happen now? Alright, that actually did work. I mean, it's not a very pleasant ride. You keep kind of moving harshly to the left and right. But it is avoiding the obstacles. I gotta give it that. This may be bad now. Because look at that. Once we start turning in, that peninsula is gonna cause the right laser to trigger first. Oh, we're far enough that it didn't. Now, in theory, this wouldn't be something you leave forever and kind of make your boat go. But this isn't. This is a not a bad, very crude system. There we go. We cleared everything, and now we're making our way to our checkpoint. So I would say that's a very successful initial test, and just worthy of much fine-tuning now. But wow, that's pretty good. We didn't destroy ourselves. These lasers do take up decent amount of energy, so we can see that it's not charging fully very quickly, but it is what it is. So cool, that's nice. And see, check this out, 2 seconds, we're gonna stop. There we go. So we actually circumvented the island just using our AP system. one thing I want to do to make it less jerky, instead of just turning this value on or off, I might have an up and down counter that will sort of, and a memory register or something that will just sort of more naturally make this thing go, like move. So let's take a look if that can work at all. Maybe we don't even need the memory register. Maybe we just need the up and down counter, and all we might need is this SR latch, so it's moving up in this case or down in this case, and then we don't need the addition part, but we probably could just have it go directly to this. Now that is just going to mean it turns more as it sees kind of the problem ahead, and we could set the minimum to -0.5 just like we had it, and the maximum to 0.5. Clamp, sure, we could have it clamped, or in fact not clamped, so then it's going to slowly drop, I guess. Go by an increment of 0.01, reset is 0, and let's see this. Also, while we're at it, I want it to be very clear in my diagnostics what side I'm turning. So let's say instead of this, I'm going to say obstacle indicator left and then right. And I'm going to change this one that we currently have. So left is if obstacle indicator. So if there's an issue to our left, we need to be turning to the right. So if there's an issue to our left, that means our left sensor picked something up, and that means it is this latch, whereas this is this latch. And let's just see how this all plays in. And I need to add another one. So I'm going to put it here and delete this one. So now this is all our left side stuff, and that's all our right side stuff. We do need electric for this. Toggle button, so we just throw in some electric. Okay, this is left. And then the other one will be right. In theory, they're never going to be on at the same time because of what we set. So let's go right. Okay, cool. Let's take a look at this. And I have no idea if it's even going to avoid the obstacle. It might be too slowly adjusting. Ooh. What is going on up there? Alright. So that kind of worked. Like, it was still quite powerful. And then it does turn more and more. Okay. Why does it go crazy when it is off? That's something that I need to kind of figure out, to be honest, because it's a little annoying. I mean, just in general. Now that means that this clamp is like triggering on, off, on, off, on, off, because this is less than I see. It's doing that because that sensor is reading 0. And it's actually less than what we need it to be. So it's like in a constant state of just going crazy. What I'm gonna do, pull these all back, add an and right off the bat here. If it's this, and if the thing is on switch. That should hopefully avoid that craziness. And then let's see if we can add an extra 0 here to make it even smoother in its turning. Alright, turn it on. So now they're not on, obviously. Okay. So we'll see once we hit 250. It's a very slow, lazy turn. I like it. But that doesn't help us if we're imminent about to crash into something. But what I can do, like, at least if the turn isn't, if it's not a major obstacle, it'll, let's put 0.05 instead, because I guess we had 0.1 previously, so. I guess it could also work in stages. Instead of this up and down counter, what would happen is, depending on the distance, there's a factor applied to reduce it. Like, say you're the full 200 meters away, maybe it'll only turn it like 0.2 or something. But then say you get, you know, real close, 100 meters away or 50 meters away, then you really gotta step on it. So that could be something to look into as well, where it might be a little more counterintuitive and not as harsh in terms of like the swinging back and forth. Now when it turns off, when this system kicks off, the rudder flies to the position of correcting the autopilot, like of making a quick correction, because it assumes the autopilot is super off course. So I'm not quite sure. I'm just trying to think how to possibly make that work, because it's going to always want to jump back to heading in the right direction. And some other things that I haven't even thought about, or that I have thought about, is what if the ship's trying to make itself through like a very narrow gap, like between two islands. It's going to be in a constant struggle to go left, right, and it might easily overcorrect. So in that case, I think that sort of a system of, you know, times 0.1 if it's going at a very far distance, times 0.3 if we're getting closer, if it's 0.7 just turn it or whatever. So let's take a look at how that can be implemented. I'm going to go ahead and delete this up down counter. We're going to stick with the system that we had here. We're going to keep this, just move them out of the way so they're not bothering us. Put this out here. So now we're back to the rudder turn and this, and of course that. So how to do this in the most efficient way? Obviously this is controlling our rudder to be 0.5, which is fairly, like, we saw it worked pretty well. It wasn't too crazy. It did swing a little bit to the left and right harshly, but now this factor here is where we can play with. So if it's off, you know, it's continuing as normal. If it's on, it'll just be a function of that. So it comes down here, through that, and through that. And we could say, like I said, 0.5 multiplied by x. And when this will turn on is if this or this, the sensors, so we need or. The only thing I don't like about that or, I was going to say if this or this is greater than a certain distance, like greater than 100 meters or greater than 150. The only problem is if we're turning left because we've detected an obstacle to the right, I don't care what the left sensor even sees. I only need to know the obstacle that's incoming. So that can be a bit of a problem. It's okay, so we will not put it here. We're going to add these and put this there. That's fine. Where we need to put things on is between this and this. And that's our path. So we got a numerical switch box here, and we'll get a numerical switch box here. If it's greater than, and if it's greater than, and we need to put a number. It could be the same number because that doesn't matter. Like this, distance to turn, and this could be distance to reduce rudder, and we'll put minimum 50, 100. So first of all, 250 might be a bit. No, I liked it. I didn't mind it. Maybe 300 would be ideal. Let's put 300, and then let's play with what we get. And I'll put this to be 500 even, because what I can do is introduce slight turning when it's that distance. So distance to reduce rudder 1. Alright, so if it is greater than, so if our laser, in this case we're turning, so we're turning because we've sensed something in the left sensor, so we're interested only what the left sensor is telling us, and that it is on. That's something to keep considering. Though, like this thing, it doesn't matter, because even if it's registering a 0, well, the simplest thing to do would just put a threshold. And that way I don't even have to put a number. Okay. Alright. So, if the threshold of this one, the left sensor, and if the threshold of the right sensor, so, is between high would be 500 or whatever the number we're doing. So the only difference is we actually have to enter this thing instead. So we've said 300, so 300 a turn. So if it is between the 300 and 200, do a certain thing. So 200 and 300, then in that case reduce it. So it multiplies it by the factor of point. Oh, I think I deleted the wrong thing. No. So if the right sensor is telling us it's between 200 and 300, then turn this on. So obviously if it's in the off position, nothing happens, and it just keeps on going its merry way. If it's in the off position, nothing happens. But if it's in the on position, we need to multiply that with 0.5x, or 0.5 multiplied by x. And same thing here. 0.5 multiplied by x, at least now, and that's in the on path, and again in the on path. So on path meaning it's between this and this. Anything less, we'll just give it the full thing. So this might stop some of the jitters. Speed sensor, the front sensor, like I said, the front sensor doesn't tell us what we're about to hit. It doesn't really matter. It's just, it'll tell us whether we need to stop or not. So we'll merge the microcontroller I created for obstacle avoidance, and in theory put it here, because this one that I have in the front now, it should move, or at least I should make it move up and down enough and fast enough. So right now it's not moving fast enough, but I should make it move up and down and fast enough that it'll determine if we're about to ground ourselves or if we're about to hit an obstacle in front. But right now it's not doing that, which is fine. So let's try turning this on. So we'll read our 300 and we're gonna see what happens. So it just does a slight adjustment, versus if we're real close to it, it should be much more violent. Like that. Alright, let's turn on the AP. try to go to the north of the island. Let's see what this thing reads. 300. Yep, there we go. We activated the first one. And it tries to go back. I mean, it's going to always try to go back. And the downside I've realized to this, while it is jittery and terrible looking, it's not very clear. And I'm sure there's a better way. I mean, there's a better way to do everything here. This is just a very clunky system. But the shorter duration that the other indicator is locked out, the better. Because if you end up, oh, look at that. If you end up locking out the other one for an extended period of time, you could end up hitting an obstacle. Something like if you're trying to make your way through a narrow channel. So we're going to see that next. I'll take this boat out to a channel and test it out. On that topic, a nice fallback would be that if we've locked out, say, the other side, like say we've detected an obstacle to the left and now we're moving to the right, but all of a sudden the right one senses something like 20 meters ahead. In theory, what should happen is that should trigger an instant dropping of this latch. So another OR to dropping this latch would be if the opposite side detects something imminent. So let's go ahead and add that actually, because that's pretty, I mean, we don't want to be turning on our 4 seconds only to end up smashing into a wall on the opposite side. That makes no sense. So what I'm going to do is put an OR here. So this or this, and same thing up there. We'll put an OR, this or this. If the opposite side, and we could put a threshold as well, is super small. So say we've detected a left obstacle and we're going at it, we're turning to the right, but all of a sudden our right one, which is right here, is inputting between 1, just so it's not on when it's 0, and like maybe 50 or 20, 25. Let's put 20. Let's put 25, just see what happens. And same thing here, so opposite one. If this one detects something between 1 and 25, then disable what we're on. So that might work. Again, I'm not going to touch the throttles. I'm not going to touch the speed sensor and all these calculations. Let's just try this as it is. I got a good world seed going, nice and close to the landmass. So we're going to try to go through one of these channels and see what happens. I'm wondering how this is going to work with this bridge obstacle. It may work terribly, because in theory it's going to detect something and it might turn right into one of these columns. Yeah, there we go. Oh my. That's definitely not what I wanted it to do. See, like, look at that. Okay, that's not a good one to determine. Let's see if the channel is going to be any better. So I'm going to hop into this seat and sort of tell it to go into here. I'm just restarting that autopilot up, and then let's say take us to this massive bay. That through all of these kind of obstacles, I think it won't work. I think this is wishful thinking, because it's gonna start freaking out, and I don't know, but we'll find out. That's the nice thing about a trial run. Now, obviously using this autopilot system you could, oh, look at that, turning already in the wrong direction. Okay. We're back on track, sort of. Now it's constantly telling the ship to do something. And it obviously wants to go that down. Oh, what's gonna happen? Alright, that one won. Okay, that was a nice clean laser detection. And it's gonna want to keep turning us into this bay to go there. So we're gonna have to kind of go around all these little crests or crevices. Let's see. Get a ping. Get a ping. Get it. No. Come on. Come on. Shoot. In theory, these lasers probably activated at exactly the same time, and that's what happened. How can we make our way around it? That I don't quite know. That was a clean ping. So it's very jittery and not very good. Other than that one hiccup. Let's see what happens next. Because yeah, if we turn too far into there, it's going to actually hit our left laser. And that left laser is going to force us to turn. Now using like a PID controller or something might be a little more, might make the system a little more clean in terms of the jitterness, but what I found is that turning the autopilot on and off will just cause that. That's like, to segue it, I could, I guess, make another microcontroller that will take the value of each of these things and sort of bring it slowly into it. But there, other than that one hiccup, we actually did it, so... Oh. I'm not quite sure why they're flashing like that, but okay. It seems that we've made it. So we're riding to the center of this little bay, and other than that one big obstacle where I'm pretty sure we attached to this side and it wanted to turn in and then it got confused and real close, the next thing would be to also have a system where it's speed dependent, so it'll actually cut throttle when it gets to a certain distance. Like maybe when it sees that it's getting real close, it'll slow down and rethink itself or something. But we did it, so I'm gonna end the video with that. Thank you for watching my little jittery autopilot system. Wow. But we did it. It stopped us. So if we weren't on this ship, if we were in the helicopter or in the boat or submarine or something, other than that one obstacle, which I'll look into how I can solve, it actually got us here all the way without me controlling anything. So I'm relatively happy off just a kind of quick controller without any fine tuning. So stay tuned for more. Thank you for watching and happy Stormworksing.